So this is a formal bit, okay? And I am really thrilled that Paul's here, because I think, the Gr8 Support movement developed in response to the voices and the wishes and the pleas of direct support workers across the country, saying they want to do so much, but sometimes are not sure how they can do it, and they're fighting in a system that sometimes doesn't allow them to respond in what we would see as a natural way to those people they support. So it's about creating and supporting, creating a space for people to explore, to celebrate the good stuff, to question the bad stuff, and try and get rid of some of the boundaries that limit people's lives. And we're seeing far too much of that taking place at the moment. So there's a small group of us here. We are recording it. People are interested. So we just want to keep growing the conversation. And Paul is one of those people that I really like, because he sort of says it as it is. He doesn't sugarcoat much. It's just like, we talk about this gut and heart response to things we see and the injustice around us. And I think that's what Paul and his team represent. It's about not accepting the status quo, as Ryan, you said last week, but looking at what's happening, being brave enough to say, what the hell is this about? And more than that, actually figuring out how we can remove some of those boundaries together. So, Paul, the startup, as you know, is really over to you to say, tell us a bit about yourself and what Stay Up Late's about, and how Gig Buddies came about as well. So tell us about that, Paul.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Some of you might know I was in a punk band called Heavy Load with 4 other men, and 3 of those men had learning disabilities, and we used to play all around the country, and we played in Europe. We even played in New York.
Cool.
And we started in '97. We went on for 15 years. And one of the things that used to really irritate us was seeing our fans, many of whom had learning disabilities, having to leave at 9 o'clock because support workers couldn't work beyond 10 o'clock at night. And then one day, we did a gig in a pub with a band, not a band that was from the disabled art scene, just a regular band, and it was a big night for us because we'd never done a night before that wasn't part of a disability arts evening, and we were having a beer afterwards and chatting. And Michael, our drummer, his support worker, came up to him and said, "Come on, drink up, it's time to go home." And Michael was really, really cross about that. And that was the moment when we said, like, this is affecting the individuals in the band and it's affecting our fans, so we've got to do something about it. And we were a little bit slow up on the uptake because we were having a documentary film made about us at that time. And I one day realised that I had one of them slow light bulb moments when I thought, hang on a minute, we've got this massive issue that we're trying to address, and we happen to have a documentary film crew following us around all the time at the moment. What if we did a campaign? It would be in the movie, and then other people would get to hear about it, and so that's what happened. And the film was called Heavy Load, and came out on the BBC, and loads of people got in touch about this issue. And for us, whilst we're called Stay Up Late, the whole issue really is about choice and deciding what time you want to go home. So, Sally, you're sort of saying, like, I've got to come up with some sort of thought-provoking quote.
I didn't know you had to. I thought listening out for one because you do it.
I've got one already. I've just written down, which is, this band's crap, I want to go home. In a sense, how many people with learning disabilities actually make a positive choice to go home from a night because they've got to be up for work early in the morning, or they're tired, or they're just not they're just not enjoying the music, just not digging it, and everyone should have, of course, every right to make those sorts of choices, but generally it's because somebody else is telling them to put their coat on, because there's a system that can't support them to do what they want to do. So that's where Stay Up Late came from. And then So it started as a campaign, and then we knew the band couldn't go on forever. And in 2012, we played our final gig, and by that time we'd set up Stay Up Late as a charity to carry the work on, because I felt a great sense of responsibility. But you can't just start a campaign as some sort of publicity stunt unless you actually think you're going to try to do something to see things through and make some sort of change. And then in 2013 we started the project, which really made a big change for the charity, because it was the first thing when we started employing staff, and we started our Gig Buddies project, which it just simply matches up people with learning disabilities with a volunteer who shares the same interest in music or other cultural things, and then they go out to regular mainstream events as friends, with a one-to-one relationship, and we facilitate the start of that relationship, and then hopefully it just flourishes naturally after we've done that initial introduction. And so that's what we do. And now we're working with organisations around the country to replicate Gig Buddies in other parts. So it's up in Halifax and Croydon and Portsmouth and Edinburgh and Norwich and
Australia.
And Australia, yes. And hopefully Bradford soon. So yeah.
And what's interesting about it, I think that's a great introduction to what Stay Up Late is and how Gig Buddies came about. And what's interesting with Gig Buddies as well, which I think is worth people knowing, is that you've talked some commissioners into funding that as a core opportunity, haven't you? So,
yeah.
So commissioners, the local authority budgets are seeing the value of that relatively natural relationship being established to support people to be part of, have a life. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Portsmouth and Halifax, which is Calderdale Council, and Bradford, they've all seen how the positive benefits for people, and in a sense, and I mentioned it in that blog post, that it doesn't seem that the negative effects of social isolation are really considered to be some sort of safeguarding issue, where I think that they really ought to be, because of the known impact on people's mental health. So if we're
tell us more what you mean by that. I'm thinking, explain that a bit more, please.
So like the campaign on loneliness have released statistics that show that statistics show that loneliness is more of a more harm to your health than smoking 15 fags a day.
Absolutely.
And it's a bigger problem than obesity, but the government's fixated on getting sugar levels down in everything and not really dealing with this massive issue, which is crippling society, which is loneliness.
Yeah.
And having a detrimental effect on people. So if we know that that's going to have a detrimental effect on people, why aren't we risk assessing it as a safeguarding issue, and really trying to deal with it?
So what you're getting at there probably is that people with learning difficulties are desperately lonely for reasons over and above the rest of the population that are lonely. Actually, yes. And so what is it that causes that, do you think? Just what is it that's going? It links a bit to the no bedtime stuff, but.
Well, before we started Gig Buddies, we did some research through the local Brighton University to find out what the obstacles were for people going out. It was clear that people had an absolute desire to be part of their community in the evening, but it was practical things like they didn't have enough support. They were worried about community safety, and in some cases that was well founded, and in other cases it was just concern. There's issues around mental health, people not having much confidence or motivation, not having much money, public transport not being reliable or usable at that time of night, and things like not knowing what was on in your community and not having anyone to go with. So all fairly practical obstacles, which is what informed Gig Buddies, and we try and address all of those things.
Great. And the solution of the system, as I always call it, is almost, well, people just don't do those things then. Rather than come up with community-based, asset-based, or find local solutions, you just say, well, people can't do it. So,
Yeah.
which is interesting, probably quite a good link onto sort of, why did you suggest the website, the webinar title is #NoBedtimes, and linking it in maybe with your reaction to that film that was posted last week on social media, because it links with that, what you found in your research, didn't it? What denies people, and then this media thing suddenly exacerbating, making these myths grow, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think firstly that the thing around no bedtimes is that frankly giving adults bedtimes is infantilizing. It's treating people like children. Not even my children have bedtimes. They pretend that they do, but they're upstairs under the duvet with the iPad or whatever they're doing. And to think that we've got a system that thinks it's absolutely fine to tell adults what time they have to go to bed really needs challenging, I think. And what we've done is we've created a culture where it's not even questioned. You go to any club night for people with learning disabilities around the country, and you'll see the same effect everywhere. 9 o'clock, hear stories of people dancing, and their support workers walk into the middle of the dance floor with their coat and tell them to put their coat on, and effectively giving people a bedtime. And also in Hertfordshire and Calderdale, they did their social work teams did these bedtime audits where one Friday evening at 8:30, they just went to a random selection of, sort of a selection of places that supported people, and just knocked on the door at 8:30 to see what was going on. Mm-hmm. So this was a Friday evening, and they discovered that I think it was something like 69% of the people living there in these places were engaged in some sort of bedtime activity. So they either had their gym jams on or they were tucked up in bed. And it's that's that. I think it's, if we give people bedtimes, it indicates that we're controlling people in so many other ways as well.
Absolutely. God, yeah, Yeah, okay. I get mad about it all as usual, but yeah, certainly in the way we talk about supporting people to live their lives, it's one of the things that is it's interesting how much is system, staff, rota, and how much is so entrenched in the culture that people don't question it. And that's the bit, isn't it, that we're trying to. We want support workers, direct support to know, have the right to questions. If they have that human question, go, why would you do that? We want to be able to ask that question and challenge that within the system so we can change it.
Rob Mitchell, who's the principal social worker in Bradford, he was talking recently about the bedtime audit, and he said what was most shocking about it was not that 69% of the people were ready for bed at 8:30 on a Friday evening, but that none of us were surprised that that's what they were going to discover. We've created this system that treats people in that way, and we just are not challenging it ourselves.
Yeah. And the other side of that was interesting. When we did facilitated the Ordinary Life Network up in Manchester, people were saying what they wanted in terms of living a good ordinary life was the right to have a slummock day. To them was a day in their pajamas, watching crap on the telly and eating, what they wanted. And the commissioners down in the south, when they heard this, that's really interesting, because if we went in to look at this, we'd assume that's bad support, because someone was in their pajamas at 11 in the morning, rather than saying, tell me about what you're up to today. Oh, I just want to slob out today because I've got nothing on, So it's interesting, isn't it? So the natural pattern of life is just being overlooked everywhere. It's craziness. So.
And I think, I sort of think back to my days when I was a registered manager, and I think support workers are under pressure. They feel like, they're being paid to do a job, and you come into work and somebody just wants to lounge around all day. You're going to feel like you're not doing your job properly. So there needs to be a culture where that sort of stuff is encouraged and celebrated and
absolutely
and allowed.
If it's every day, you might question it, but if it's occasionally, whatever, that's exactly it. So
yeah. And I'd always say, if someone's gone out clubbing, then they're probably not going to want support till 11 o'clock or midday, are they? They would just want to be in. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Tell us a little bit, in case people haven't seen it, the film that was shared last week on the national media, on the BBC, that was promoted as good, I think, and tell us what you saw, what you heard, and your reaction, and then we'll think maybe about why is it some of these practices are happening, and what do we need to do to remove them, yeah?
So if you saw the story, I first noticed it when somebody shared it with me and said, "This is what I'm talking about. We need more of this sort of stuff." And it was a man in Manchester. He's a DJ. He has a learning disability, and he wanted to go to a rave. And there was this feeling that regular raves are dangerous. And also, so in this article, basically what they say is regular raves are dangerous for people with learning disabilities, and also staff can't work late. So the answer, which is like Sally says, the system solution to this was to create a rave exclusively for people with learning disabilities that started at 6 o'clock and ended at 9. Now,
what are you saying in Yorkshire?
It's
We're booing. Good.
So, I mean, obviously, I've got some issues with that. I mean, one of the things to get out of the way really is calling it a rave in the first place. Now, if for me a rave that creates a picture for me of people illegally in a field with a sound system out of their boxes dancing till sunrise, and the police, arresting them and things like that. But, so I'm not sure if it even is a rave, but kind of saying that this is a solution and it ends at 9 o'clock. For me, that isn't inclusion, it's segregation, pure and simply. It's just, and it's really sticking a really poor sticking plaster over a really bad problem. We should be outraged that we live in a country where we accept that people will get abused for having a learning disability in a nightclub. I don't even know if that happens, or whether that's something that we just think might happen. So we should be appalled at that, and we should also be challenging the fact that support workers can't work late. And actually, I think the solution is really quite simple if you think about it, because it might mean that we have to be flexible for 3 or 4 hours a month or something like that if somebody wants to go off and go clubbing or whatever. I don't think it's a massive shift that needs to happen, to be honest, but it's become a really massive issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's fair, in terms of lots of direct support workers said to me, "Sally, we said we want to work later and swap off just over, but we've been told we can't." So it's not that people don't want to. Some support workers may not want to go to a nightclub and they don't like them. At some point, I know. And I think it's about who you go with and how they support you, isn't it? And how you're supposed to be included for anybody that really makes sense, obviously. But why do you think there hasn't been a strong reaction, and what is it that's causing this behaviour? So in terms of what are the barriers that are in place? Just sort of clarifying some of those, really.
So why do you think there hasn't been a strong reaction?
Well, yeah, so that story and maybe others. Why isn't there a big reaction? 9 o'clock. It's 2017, so. Because
I started drafting an article in reaction to a story that the BBC had also put out I think it was in June, about a festival that took place in Chester. Do you remember that story? And it was from 12 o'clock till 4 p.m. and it was an exclusive festival for people with learning disabilities. And people going, "Oh yeah, we need more of this sort of stuff. This is fantastic." And in a sense, it made everybody feel really good about themselves. That they and I'm using the word they ironically, but they are all happy and dancing and eating ice cream and all of that sort of stuff. When the reality is that you know, we've supported people to lots of mainstream festivals. Glastonbury, you know, it's like the mother of all festivals, and never seen anybody getting abused there because of their disability. Everybody's too busy having a nice time. So why, I don't know why we're not asking questions of these things. I mean, in a sense, we have a big network of inclusive club nights around the country. And in my article, I was keen. I don't really want to criticise them, but I sort of see the inclusive club nights as a stepping stone on the journey to proper inclusion. But I think we think these places are a destination that we've sorted it. We've created a club night. If you notice, the ending times are getting earlier and earlier, and the starts are perhaps getting earlier and earlier, or the nights are just, the evenings just getting shorter. So we go to a disco for 2 hours, you know, and I think I don't know. We don't seem perhaps prepared to ask the more difficult questions, but the things that will really transform things for people.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking maybe before we go on to thinking about some ideas of what needs to be done, does anyone else out there? So saying, why do you think this is the case? Why is it that people aren't questioning and challenging the idea that people only be out till 9 o'clock, or that a nightclub should be from 6 till 9, or a rave indeed? So anyone else want to comment on there? And it's just gut feeling is fine. Why do you think it's happening? Okay, I think there's a hand up there, so anybody can speak. Yeah.
It's probably because it's being presented as so positive.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's that if you presented something as, you know, so positive, that this is amazing, that this has happened, people are less likely to challenge it. They're just accepting what has happened without looking under the underlying issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when I posted up a critical comment about the festival in Chester on Facebook, I got a bit of mild abuse of people saying, "Oh, why can't you just be happy and positive about things rather than critiquing them?" But you know, it's my job to critique them. You know, so yeah, I think you're right, Ryan.
I'm not questioning it. So we'll come on in a minute, maybe how we can stimulate some thinking, questioning around that. But anyone else got any ideas of why you think the status quo is, well, why things are being maintained the way they are or seen as okay?
Is there anything that's happening politically with the reduction of resources that are making people just want to hang on to anything that they would see as positive?
I think that's interesting.
I know that when we had a lot of budget cuts, that's when people certainly staff got really stressed. And families got stressed too, because all of a sudden they felt devalued more broadly than before.
So I think it's almost, to me, I think what you're saying, and Paul, it's almost like we've potentially, because the money's being cut and there's not a lot of money and a lot of support hours, people are reducing the aspiration. So anything that's slightly good is better than nothing.
Yes, that's some of what we saw.
Yeah.
And it's that whole notion of, if you like, discomfort or dehumanization or less than equal that comes out in unexpected ways. Just when you think you're moving forward, you know, you get hit and say, "Oh, I guess we haven't really solved that."
Yeah.
So Paul, you're absolutely right. It's your job to continue to challenge what the system's solutions are, and your job won't ever be finished. Sorry.
Yeah.
Job for life. 24/7.
Yeah.
No, fine. Yeah.
It's in your DNA. It's who you are.
Yeah.
Gotta do it.
I think another thing that we've noticed is that we've people have created these false stories really around community safety and things. So we get presented, it's a health and safety issue.
Yeah.
Also, there's the issue of support workers saying they want to work late, they want to shift their shifts around, like you say, but the managers won't listen to the solutions that they're presenting, the sort of pragmatic solutions. And and this idea that suddenly at 9 o'clock all of the violent criminals hit the dance floor and start, and suddenly start abusing people. I mean, I can only speak from perspective of going out in Brighton, and there are bits of one street in Brighton I don't like on a Saturday night, but generally I feel safe most places in the city. And so it's been also having that local knowledge, isn't it, of what's you can't just say carte blanche everywhere it's safe. Yes, it probably isn't, but
I think that's something about gig buddies as well, because what you do is you match local people to local people. So the gig buddy volunteer will have a sense of, once they get to know the individual, they'll research with them what's around. Because the gig buddy volunteer will know the community, they'll have that sense, won't they? So in Biz, well, that street I wouldn't go down on Saturday night, but there's loads of other streets we can go and explore together. And I think that's the beauty of those relationships, isn't it? And that's what we all aspire direct support workers to be allowed to do, is to figure out with the people they support, the person they support, where they'd like to explore and how they do that.
Absolutely. I think,
Again, the other thing for me is that this great misconception that people are safer when they're supported by a service. In my experience, obviously, some people do need that direct paid service, but in my experience, a lot of people are much safer when they are in the bosom of their community. And, when they're supported to form real, genuine friendships rather than a system-led, support.
Yeah. And I heard some interesting data last week about festivals. So Download Festival, the Heavy Metal Festival, has the least crime of any of the festivals. Very safe place to go. And the festival that had the most crime this year was Wilderness.
And I think I'm right in saying that Glasgow.
What's the common denominator there? Yeah.
Well, actually, so I think it's interesting. It goes back, it's the whole social media power, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which then helps us think. So then when we create these things that look really safe, people go, oh, that's good, it's better than nothing. And then we've got all these false stories and this idea of safety, and managers maybe, and senior managers not listening to direct support staff and their responsive ideas. So if we nudge forward a bit, 'cause I'm conscious of time, so it's 43, is that we've highlighted some of the stuff we know just isn't right. It isn't right. We're talking about human rights, aren't we? We're talking about people having good ordinary lives. It doesn't make any sense and shape, whatever. What are some of the things that you think need to be done, Paul? And I don't really want to do that from telling us the story of something you've seen that excites and inspires you, that might say, well, what did they do to make it work? You could do it that way around, but over to you. So what's some of the stuff that needs to be done, and what are you seeing that's great, and what are they doing that's getting beyond these limitations?
Well, I mean, I sort of started, I think it's quite simple stuff. I mean, I remember when I was a registered manager, my team inspired me, because when I arrived at that place, a team meeting, they'd get the paper out. This was pre-internet days, and they'd get the paper out with the What's On guide, and we'd have the rota and the diary, and we'd just look at what was coming up and see if there were any gigs coming up that would be of interest to the people we supported. And then there would be a team negotiation about who wanted to support it. Generally, that would sort of be like a minor fight, because everybody wanted to go out and do these things. So that was just a team that were up for it, and as a manager, I was more than happy to move the route around and shift things. I mean, maybe one of the reasons is that it's just a pain in the arse reorganising rotas, and managers just can't be bothered to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's another task to do, isn't it? So maybe that's a practical thing. But I think, like I said, I think we maybe we're talking in terms of shifting 3 or 4 hours a month or something like that. Maybe that's what needs to happen to start with, just to try and make this cultural change and say it's not like a massive change that needs to happen, just a bit of flexibility.
Absolutely. And you know what would be great within the Great Support movement, people shared how they do that, because I know one organisation I've spent some time with, one person was doing that and they were just finishing their shift, their work time, half an hour earlier for a week, and it made up the hours. It wasn't as even as a whole rota change, just they left half an hour earlier. So on that, so they clawed back their 2.5 hours in a week. So it was just, so maybe it's sharing as much of that. Well, how do you do it and make it simple? So I think, Ryan, you're a team leader or a manager now, aren't you? So
one of them, the only problem sort of relevant I can see here is when we talk to care managers for the local authority.
Okay.
And they give an allocation of hours. Say one person we support gets 14 hours of one-to-one a week.
Okay.
And if you can't evidence that them hours have been used in a week, then the hours get reduced.
Oh,
so you're planning pre-activities that are, you know, it's not fluid, it's not like life. You have to plan what you're doing every day. There's no opportunity for a spontaneous going out. You know, fancy going out later. Well, you can't because you've used all your one-to-one hours. Fortunately, we find ways to get around these and make things more natural, but for some services it makes it quite difficult.
And what it does as well, it encourages people to fly under the radar again, doesn't it? We won't tell people we're doing this, so the care managers think, oh, everything's okay. So I love the fact you're finding ways of doing it, but it's interesting. We're definitely, Paul, are you hearing that around the place? And Katie, I'm definitely hearing it all around the country. I don't know if Madeleine and Jackie can hear us. So I think they might be there, but it's happening all over the place, isn't it? Where care managers are controlling the weekly hours and they will take it back if you don't spend them that week, which is a crazy way to be, isn't it?
Yeah. It must create so much work and so many problems. It makes no sense.
And you know, I know of care managers who will want the person, as part of their individualised budget, want the person to focus on independent skills rather than the social skills and the, you know, all the connecting that goes along with that, which really helps to keep that person much safer, weller and happier than being able to make a cup of tea, for instance, you know. So again, it's kind of understanding that having friends and going out and having that ordinary stuff is just critical to, you know, being healthy, you know,
well, instead of independent skills, it's looking at them as interdependent skills, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's interesting, on one hand you've got care managers saying to Ryan and colleagues and others around the country, you can't do that. On the other hand, you've got commissioners saying to Paul, yes, we'll part fund or fund gig buddies because we recognise that loneliness is an issue and it's probably a smart business decision as well in terms of saving money in the future to have gig buddies in. So on one hand you've got commissioners doing that. So we can't answer this now, but I'd really welcome ideas. And as the movement grows, how do we get these conversations out there? So, you know, I think Ryan's raised a really important point that I've forgotten about, which is the control of the care manager on a week-to-week basis, that people then they're either flying under the radar or they're not figuring out how to get around that. And so people's lives are controlled. But all the other reasons you've given as well and how we find solutions is going to be really important, isn't it? So,
Just thinking about Paul's idea of interdependent skills, which I like that a lot. You know, the loneliness is a really big deal for most people. But I wonder if instead of thinking about loneliness, what you think you want instead might be community engagement or it might be connection. And so I wonder if there's some kind of campaign for engagement, or, you know, so what is it we're wanting to have happen? Campaign for connection, campaign for, I'm just brainstorming here.
this is where David Toniak hit it straight, isn't it, with loneliness being the only real disability. And, you know, it's about recognising that being connected is it's a lifesaver, you know, it really is. And I think, you know, telling those positive stories, you know, we've just been talking here today about a young man who has been on the verge of being really isolated, complete family breakdown, and in the space of a couple of weeks, literally 3 weeks, of getting to know him, me getting to know him and introducing him to other people in his community, his life has literally turned around, and he's been saved from, you know, being sent off to an ATU or something, you know, equally as awful, just simply because somebody bothered to, you know, to look at what would help, which is having friends and connections. And, you know, again, we shouldn't, people with a learning disability or whatever their support need is, shouldn't be relying on services to help provide that great life. You know, we should all be living interdependently. We've all got so many things to offer each other and to learn from each other. And certainly this young man, his life, you know, his whole well-being has been saved from being connected to people in his community. You know, a couple of weeks ago, people were putting a high alert out, you know, we've noticed this young man, you know, this description, looking over our garden fences, you know, beware, beware. And in a couple of weeks, we've managed to turn that round, and he's got so many positive stories to tell. It's about sharing that stuff and making sure the commissioners and the care managers hear about that. And again, when you're thinking about care managers, they're doing what they think is their job, don't they? So again, it's about how they can, you know, reframe their job. And that's communication up and down from the commissioners, because you've got the commissioners up there who are willing to pay for it, and you've got support workers who are willing to support it, but it's the bit in the middle, isn't it, that kind of gets a bit blurred.
Okay. So in terms of what we can do about it, so people being denied the right to be out late and to go to places that everyone else would take for granted, or be involved and be included, there's something about Ryan's point around people will see the story in the press last week and just think it's some people may not question it. So we need to start sharing stories that show there is another way, and actually this isn't okay. So one thing is to write, like Paul's blog, which I've sent you and I'll send you again, that's really, we need to spread that and get people to question, isn't it? So the more we get people to question, and we don't, Paul's blog, I think yours got a lovely balance. It doesn't attack people, it just says it's not okay for you, so it's not okay for anybody, is it? So it's really clear in there. And so I think in terms of action, what can we do about it? There is some spreading the good stories, so care managers, commissioners, social, you know, all those people see it, but the community at large as well. So maybe we need to find ways of sending the positive stories to the BBC as well, which I'm sure you'll be onto, Paul. But that thing as well, they need to say that they need to know what the really exciting stuff is.
Yeah. I did email them to ask them to stop putting stuff out like that, because it was lowering the bar on what we should expect from people. But absolutely, I think getting those more positive, natural stories out is a good start. Yeah. I mean, for us, we're using our AGM to focus on the issue this year. So if anyone wants to come down to Brighton, you're more than welcome. And you know, focusing on what are these barriers and what are the ones that keep coming up, and what can we really do to try and change those. And I feel like we've been shouting about it for a long time, so it's not really like we need to encourage people with learning disabilities to keep on shouting about it in a way. We need to start focusing on the people who are making the decisions to deny people their rights, who are consciously and subconsciously making decisions around inequalities, and we see that within a provider. So like a large provider, you'll have some really fantastic support, and in another house you might have not very fantastic support, and and it's down to the local leadership, isn't it? And how these providers might say we do person-centered planning, but at a local level, we need to get to these managers and somehow. So in a way, it's if the care managers are forcing a system where people are going under the radar to make good stuff happen, that's great, but it's not going to change things in the long run because everybody's doing things unofficially.
Absolutely. Anybody got any comments or questions or ideas for actions? Because I'm always keen that our webinars, we don't have to have a plan of action, but is there anything we can do as a great support movement and the way we connect that's going to sort of bring about change and question and challenge, really, because what we're about, innit? So any comments or questions from anybody?
I just wondered, Paul, at some stage, probably you can't go into it right now, but I wondered about the structure of Gig Buddies and if that's a registered, regulated service now, or how formal your Gig Buddies is.
We don't have any contracts from the councils or anything. It's so it's a volunteer. Essentially, it's a volunteer befriending scheme. So we employ Kate and Harry to coordinate the scheme, but it's really important to us that people have people in their lives who aren't paid to be there. So that's what the role of the buddy is. So yeah, so it's not a support relationship. We've got there's some really core principles. So it's about people with learning disabilities leading the relationship and the project, and it's about meaningful, real community participation, and it's about friendships, and it's also about cultural life. But apart from that, it will look different in different places. So, for example, in Brighton, there's loads of stuff going on. In Halifax, it's a different scene, and they're going out to Hebden Bridge and other places around. It's a bit more rural. It'll be different in every place, but as long as those core things are there. And one practical thing that we've decided to do as a team in reaction to the Manchester non-rave. We're teaming up with. We thought we're going to start a night that starts at 9 o'clock, but we're not running it. We're just going out on the town, and it so happened that some friends of ours, the English Disco Lovers, whose tagline is "Don't hate, gyrate." They're like an anti-fascist disco people. We're going to their night. We've lost Jane. We're going to their night. They're great. The music's great. We're just going to have a night out in Brighton. Go to some different bars and clubs, and then finish with breakfast on Brighton Beach in the morning. Although they're telling me, not everything we do has to end with sunrise. But it's kind of a saying that the town is safe, the nightlife is safe, and let's just do stuff. So we're going to invite a bunch of the Gig Buddies to come along, and people will go home when they've had enough.
When they're tired.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So I mean, that is my maybe, and we would see the two thoughts. My two thoughts, yeah. The reasons you go home, the brand's crap, or you're feeling knackered.
There you go. That says it all. That's why you go home. Love it. And what we're thinking about the rest of you is, I was talking to Paul. I don't want to make their night complicated, but they're doing that. So I thought, well, why don't we maybe put a message out to the Great Support Movement saying, how about going out at 9 o'clock on the 3rd of November? So I've already arranged with my mate Sammy and her sister to go out clubbing on the Friday the 3rd of November. So we're doing it. I'm trying to find one with enough disco music to please both of us. But we will put that out as an idea to the movement, saying why not go out at 9 but only if people want to and they choose to and they come home when they want to. So okay. So Paul, anything else before we turn off the webinar?
No, I'm going to carry on challenging things that look lovely and cuddly, and so actually no, they're insidious, and they're not doing people any any favours.
Yeah.
So as nice as they look, I'm going to carry on.
Great, wonderful.
Great.
Thank you so much, everyone. Jackie, I don't know if you're there. Madeleine, I don't know if you're there. Ryan, I know you're there. I can't see you. Katie and everyone else, it's been really good you're here. We will send you a recording as soon as I can transfer it, whatever I have to do with it, and edit bits out. But thank you so much. Do post on the Gr8 Support Movement, Great Changemakers page with any comments. Otherwise, we'll be in touch very soon. Thank you, Paul. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, cheers, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.